CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. Thanks for tuning in today. We've got a great guest. It is Sean Dotson. He's the founder of Automation AMA. He's co-founder of Automatica. He's strategic advisor for Nano Fulfillment Incorporated and strategic and technical advisor for Accelerant. He's got 3 decades in industrial automation, robotics, and packaging. You'll see him on LinkedIn posting and toasting, telling truths about industry as a whole, and he pulls no punches. Sean Dotson, welcome to CMMS Radio.
Hey, Greg. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a blast. And, you and I have kind of met online, like chiming in on some different posts. And I love the stuff you put out there because it's real, it's raw, and
thank you.
You don't pull any punches. I know you're not out to hurt anyone. You're out to make a difference. You're super passionate about what you do. And I think a lot of us in the world of maintenance, manufacturing, all this automation, industry, big, heavy equipment, small things, everything, we just want that. It makes all the difference in the world. So if you don't mind, I want to jump right in and talk about a post you put out about 2 weeks ago, give or take a day or two. And this was around private equity. This is a topic that's important to everyone, but I want to read this really quickly. So what Sean wrote was an open letter to private equity. You know money and capital. You do not know the business that you are buying. Stop pretending you do. Keep the or hire the correct talent that made the acquisition attractive. Let them, with your guidance, do what they do best. If you think you know better than them, then you would have started a company that did what they do, but you didn't. So stop. I'm tired of seeing PE ruin good companies with their foolish decisions. So being somewhat mindful and careful, but at the same time real, I just want to tell you, I found the post refreshing and true because it highlights what seems to be the right approach. You find a company that's doing well, it's got the right ARR, valuation, and all this, and you buy it. And then what we see a lot of times, we hear all these crazy horror stories. They start unpacking boxes, repacking them, restacking them, making a bunch of changes when it might stand to reason, wow, that's a great company. We're going to buy that company. Let's keep things intact and be very mindful and careful about the changes we're about to make. So just talk to us about that whole thing.
Sure. And a little bit it was, it is a stereotype, right? I'm making a point that it's not everybody. It's not all private equity firms. There's plenty of good ones out there. However, unfortunately, there are a number that go in and, as I said in the post, they think they know your business, and whether that's automation or whether it's they're buying vet offices or whether they're buying car washes, it doesn't really matter. They think they know this business better than the people who built up that business, and they probably know a lot of things more so than the proprietors. They might know the back office. They might know how to join together, IT systems or things like that. And that is part of the beauty of private equity, is that it's trying to make 1 + 1 = 3. It's when they start getting out of their lane, and when they start making decisions for the strategic and technical aspects of the company, when they don't fully understand those. I've seen plenty of companies where they have just decided to, almost pivot, not quite 180, but they're pivoting 150 degrees away from what that company was really good at, which just it takes away from the value that they paid for that company. And then they start losing people, and then they start losing customers, and then they wonder why this is not working well. So I've always been a big believer, not even just in private equity, but if you're a business owner, find people who know what they're doing, hire them, and let them do what they're doing with your guidance, right? Yes, you bought the company, you need to have some guidance in it, but you don't need to be second guessing every decision or or even going against every decision that a lot of your team is making. So that was it. Again, it's, in articles like this, you want to spark conversation, so use a little bit of hyperbole here and there, and a little bit of stereotyping and all that. But I've always said stereotypes usually have some sort of basis in fact, right?
Sure. And I think to be fair, with all the different experiences, I've only had minor experiences, and so my opinion isn't as well founded as, say, for example, someone like yourself and many other people when it comes to dealing with private equity or being part of private equity. I think there's a lot, as far as I can tell, good opportunities out there. The intentions are there to, obviously we all know we're in business to make money, but in a lot of ways what we're really focusing in on is a particular problem, some impetus as to why a technology or service or consulting type thing was designed and created in the first place by somebody. And then it gets built up. And it's my kind of curiosity here I want to ask you is when private equity is out here, we know they're looking for these good opportunities, maybe, solvent companies and opportunities to cover well that typical 8% that they're on the hook for, and they really are on the hook for it. They cannot avoid it. They have to pay it. They have to make it, and that causes some kind of need to make those quicker pivots that might be less well informed just because they've got time pressures, right?
Right.
How do all
Sure.
these things in your view culminate to impact, like, for example, maybe a private equity company gets involved with or acquires a piece of CMMS technology. That's the world I spend a lot of time in, computerized
Mm-hmm.
maintenance management software. And it's got all the goodness. And then some of the things that off the top tend to look attractive is how we could trim some fat. Any
Right.
of those things that you can talk to us about, where, again, we're not calling anybody out. What we're saying is
No.
to everyone, hey, look at this, consider this.
Yeah, we want to make it better, right? I think everybody involved, whether you are whether you're the purchaser or whether you are the purchasee, I think ideally everybody wants to have the best outcome. So, um, well, I think one of the important things is to consider is, the private equity firms. You're exactly right. They do have a time frame typically. They're going to fund length. They a lot of times want to actually rotate these companies over quicker than the funds length of the funds, the 10 years usually maximum, because they want to have another fund so they can get into it. That's just how they make their money, which is perfectly fine. Um, in that article, I talk a little bit about venture capital as well. You've got private equity, you've got venture capital. Very different outcomes, very different ways of looking at things. And one of the theories that I proposed is maybe there needs to be something that's in between these two. Venture capital, as I always said, it's kind of like playing roulette. It's throwing out 35 bets onto the table and hoping one of them hits at 35 to one. Well, hopefully, actually, you're less than 35 bets, 10 bets. One of them hits at 35 to one, boom, you've made it. And the rest of them pretty much all lose. Private equity, they can't have losers over and over again. They need to have those companies that are winners, which then causes, as you said, is trimming the fat. And sometimes fat is not always fat. Sometimes you cut a little too deep into the bone, So something in between those two where you've got a company that is already established. Private equity wants a company that's established, that's doing well. VC is taking a shot at an idea that might turn into the next Uber or the next Amazon.
Mm.
Somewhere in between, though, is maybe you've got a company that's doing okay, but with some investment, $2, $3, $4, $5 million, they could get an MRP system or a CMMS system or a new CAD software or better marketing. I mean, they can invest into strategic markets and become a great company. And you're not going to get 100x return, but you might get 5 or 6x return, which I'll be honest with you, I think you and I both think 5x returns it's not a bad investment on your money.
Not at all.
So, I think there's room in between, and I've really only found one or two institutions that are really doing that type of investing. It tends to be either one or the other, private equity or VC. And I think there's room in the middle. And I've had this conversation with several people, and both in the industry and in finance, and a lot of them have said like, yeah, we agree. There's probably is room for somewhere in the middle.
It's almost as if, yeah, since you can't truly blend them, that's what the middle would end up being, is some form of blending or balancing of these kind of approaches and principles. And certainly the bigger challenge would be what are their own strategies for exit and harvesting, which has a major impact. A question was asked of me recently where I was kind of put on the spot, like what would your advice be to, founders when they're considering things like their exit? And it, it's not exactly a PE or VC, but then again, it's a related question. When we look at those things, how critical is that to really know from the outset at that stage where a proprietor, a corporation, is driving well, they're in the black, they're not in the red, and they weren't thinking about selling or taking on any investment, but they got that magical phone call where somebody said the right thing and they actually
Hmm.
diagnosed, in a way, an opportunity for this individual or this board that has this smaller company or whatever. How should people be thinking about that in your view when it comes
Hmm.
to their exit? And what I'm really getting at is, I'd love for you to talk about the partial exit and the full exit and what somebody should do post exit.
Mm. Okay. All right. Well, there's a little bit to unpack there. So, I would say if you are just kind of cruising along, you've got a good company, and somebody calls you up and says that, do you want to sell it? You are probably a year to 2 years out from selling your company. Otherwise, you're probably leaving money on the table. If you take that offer that comes along, and yep, I'll sell, you probably could build more value into it, because selling a company takes some deliberate thought about how to structure the company. So, what I see in a lot of people in our industry, there tends to be, an owner or an owner and a VP, one or two key individuals who make all the decisions, who make all the strategy, who do most of the work, and not to say that the rest of the company doesn't do work, but they do the high level work. And private equity firms don't want the company to be reliant upon any one person. They want it to be a functional unit. So you've got to build a team that will remain on, regardless whether you stay on or not, to continue to make sure that the company functions as is. You should have things like procedures in place, documented methodology of how you're going to do things, so that it's a self fulfilling machine. It's a perpetual motion machine, basically. So it doesn't matter whether I'm there or not. The machine just kind of keeps on running. So that's the important thing. Is, the rule of thumb is, if you decide you want to sell, you're probably a year to two out. And I'm not going to even get into some of the financial things that you can do. You can, you know, and I'm not saying you're playing around with numbers, but you can shift monies around here and there, and maybe cut some expenses here and there to make the numbers look a little bit more attractive to firms. And that's something that, again, has to be methodical. Um, you know, Partial exits. I've always said, I've always had a belief: 51 or nothing. I'm going to either be a 51% partner and I'm going to be a majority partner, or I'm not going to be a partner. And some people are okay with being, less than that. And if you're okay with that type of, hey, I'm only a 10% partner and I've got 10% equity in it, that's fine. However, you've just got to consider that you are only a 10% partner. So you don't get as strong as a vote as if you were a 51% partner. So you have to make sure that you are that type of person. You've got that type of personality that will work in that situation. Um, a full exit. A lot of times. They'll want you to stay on for a period of time for transition. A lot of times there's some, lack of better terms, some golden handcuffs. There's an earn out that you need to stay for so long and hit some certain metrics to get the full purchase price from the company.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here to kind of talk about what's the best dealer. Every deal is different, right? So
Yeah.
you need to make your own decision there. But I would say that regardless of whether you stay on partial or you're going to have an exit, I think you need to go in to a sale of a company with the assumption that you probably will not be there, within 1 to 2 years, whatever your agreement is. Sometimes people think that, oh yeah, I'll stay there for forever, and as long as they make me happy, I'll be there. It's tough for business owners, I think, to see some of these changes. And to be completely fair, the company bought your company. They own it now. It's their company. They can do whatever they want to with it. But it's sometimes hard to sit as a business owner and say, I disagree with these decisions and I don't think you're doing the right thing. It's hard to carry forward what they're asking you to do when you disagree with it, right? So I always said, if you stay on extra, to me, that's gravy, right? That's above and beyond. But you need to be prepared, I think, that when your contract, quote unquote, is over, be prepared to probably move on, and don't be upset about it. Right? That was a contractual obligation. It's business. It's how it is. So
Yeah. Yeah. And again, these are a lot of generalizations that can act as some kind of guidance. We're not out here giving legal advice or anything. Full
yes, right.
disclosure or disclaimer, everybody. This is edutainment,
Yeah,
and we're having a little fun talking about some real things. But if you really want to get deep in the weeds on these kind of topics, you got to have your one-on-one conversations. You're not going to
yeah,
get all that from the podcast. But one of the things you mentioned that I like it because I've had some of my own personal experiences when you do an exit, partial or otherwise, and then you're going to go into, let's say, for example, a consulting period, and then there are the golden handcuffs, so to speak, that you're going to get to a certain point. There's going to be a holdback that you're going to earn out or an earn back, and I think this idea about the plan and the mindset going into it, I can attest that when you have a thing, your business, and you go along with it when it goes elsewhere, one of the more important things you said is you've got to go into this knowing this is not yours anymore. You may have some influence, but you're much better off understanding you've got to learn the new system of the new owning org, whether you're going to
yes,
stick around or not. And you have to have that mindset because anything else really sets you up for kind of looking at it wrong, experiencing it in the wrong way. You've had an exit or partial exit. So when I talk about post exit planning, I think I like what you said, along with the idea that if it's a full blown exit, I think people should take a little bit of a break unless they already had a few other entities in motion. Like I think you could
right.
speak to that because you're
Yeah,
involved
yeah,
in multiple entities. So
yeah.
that almost gives you like a safety net, like, okay, it's time for this one. Almost like
Mhm.
I've got 18 cars. I don't have 18 cars, people. And you're going to finally let go of that, 69 Camaro that you
Mhm,
always wanted. You finally had it, but
mhm.
it's time.
Right.
And
Yep.
but
Yep.
you've got 17 other ones. I think that's a good thing. But this idea about taking a break if you make a full exit,
I
what do you think?
Yeah, very important actually, and I did. Um, I had the fortunate luck that I knew some people who had done this before. A lot of people in the industry that I talked to, asked them about what I should do after I decided to, to fully exit, the company after after a period of time. Um, you know, I immediately ignored what they said and didn't take a break, and tried to get right back into it because I was just so used to, every day getting up, going, doing work, solving problems, things like that. And
Mm,
what I quickly found out was they were correct. I did need a break after, you know, 18 plus years of owning the company, another almost two of working for it. So 20 years in the same company. um, and 30 years in the industry, I needed a little time just to kind of take a step back and figure out what I wanted to do. Because
Yeah.
I was kind of jumping on some things like, oh, yeah, that'd be fun. And that'd be fun. And I really wasn't thinking them through necessarily. Is this what I really, really want to do? So I then decided, I said, okay, I'm going to take a solid, I told myself 6 months. Ended up being a little closer to 9, maybe or so. Before I said, now I'm going to, really, and it's not, that's what I'm looking for. I was going to make a definitive decision as to what I really wanted to do with confidence. So, and even then, I had a couple false starts. You know, Automatica was a startup that I founded with a German partner. We were looking at doing software to, I don't want to say replace PLCs, but basically be able to do PLCs with drag and drop software for some lower level automation projects, things like that. And it it worked out well. We had a demo, we had, a proof of principle, and it happened to be right around the time I started going to raise funds was right when Silicon Valley Bank, went belly up. And I had so many VCs say, "Hey, love the idea. It's great, but we're not investing in anything right now. Just nothing." And after getting that message multiple times, and I said, the timing is just not right on this, guys. Let's, we're going to put this on the back burner for now. And then, some of the other things that I've been involved in were people coming to me and asking for my assistance. The Automation AMA was a consultancy that I started helping, manufacturers and automation companies. And to an extent, to some institutional investors, private equity and venture capital, helping them as well from a advisory standpoint. And that led to a couple of companies that actually asked me to come on as a fractional C-suite, typically like a CTO or a COO. So, and those have been fun. That has been a good time. I really enjoy a lot of what I do. But you do definitely have to be very thoughtful about what you want to do. Otherwise, you will find yourself kind of just taking on the next thing that comes along,
Yeah.
and then you'll be like, yeah, that's not really what I want to do. So you get a couple false starts. I'm fortunate enough that I can be in a position where I can pick and choose a little bit of what I'd like to do, but I also know that my brain it's too busy. I think most engineers are this way. A lot of engineers never really retire; they just work less. So.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I I've known I know a lot of different engineers and different types of engineers, whether reliability engineers, uh, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, civil engineers, and it goes on and on from there. But I think the reason I wanted to ask the question is I think it's a wholesome piece of insight, if you will,
Mhm.
to what an exit looks like once it's done.
Yeah.
And, for me, I think of it as, you got to let the smoke clear a little bit. You got to kind of do a reset. Of course, unless you've already got something going on. If you already had that plan, then you can move into
Yeah.
execution. Um,
Absolutely.
I also think,
Absolutely. It's an emotional thing too.
yeah,
That detachment is harder. I mean, there's probably some people that can just walk away, right? But when you've built something from the ground up over a period of decades, it's hard to let that go sometimes and not be slightly emotional about it. It's hard sometimes just not seeing the same people. I was used to going into the office all the time. Yeah, I'd work from home occasionally, and I traveled a lot too. But I'd always at least once a week usually get into the office and you know talk with the people. And I had that employee that we talked about football with, and another employee that we talked about movies, and I had those bonds over the number of years. And when you walk away from that, that's a hard thing. You don't get that anymore on a daily basis. So I think you got to sometimes figure out how to reset and reinvent yourself. What am I going to? Who's Sean now? I defined myself
yeah,
by the company for the longest time. How do I define myself now as post company?
this is good stuff because I was thinking about all this same type of stuff, maybe with different words. But as far as the experience goes, and I think that's the thing. People have to really think about the exit, and it's exciting. It's a good thing. It's a good thing when you have an exit, because another one of those questions that was asked of me is, when we go into business of any kind, do we go into it knowing that I'm starting this business because at some point I'm going to sell it? That's not always the case. Sometimes it's a lifestyle business, and people say, well, what do you mean? Well, it's a business that's set up and run really, really well to make money, but it's not designed to necessarily scale. It pays the bills. Maybe it's the type of business that allows you a lot of the freedoms to have that time with family and all that. So these are all considerations. And there is kind of a vacuum that's created when you
Mhm.
make the exit. And I think one of my favorite things about building and growing a company as one of the co-founders is the teams you get to assemble and you get to see them thrive. So when I had an exit, my big thing was I want to protect the team. I didn't even care about
Yes.
myself. I just wanted
Yes.
all of my employees to be able to
Mhm.
go along and not have too much disruption too
Yep.
soon. You know, give them some
Yep.
runway, see if they can stick. And sure enough, when you see that happen, wow, it's a great thing. I've seen
Yeah.
people that I worked with stay in that situation for a long time. I want to switch gears. So
Mhm.
before we do that, when it comes to PE, we're generally saying, hey, PE, try to do better on those that aren't. And the ones that are, we appreciate you.
Yeah.
And we don't
Exactly.
know if
Yeah.
there's a right way, but do the right things if you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Just listen to the people who are the experts in that field, right? I mean, you bought a company for a reason. It was a successful company. It did well. You didn't, unless you're a turnaround firm, you weren't buying, a piece of junk. You were buying a valuable company, and there's a reason it's a valuable company. And typically, it's because the people there know what they're doing. Now, could they use some guidance and help? Sure, of course, but let's listen to their opinions and listen to their knowledge and experience and all that.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I want to switch to now, two different things. One, with your experience in leadership and working with teams and working with like organizational culture from a maintenance perspective, whether it's automation, manufacturing environments, and how teams kind of move together, I wanted to ask just for some of your insight and experiences when it comes to getting teams that are going to utilize technology to
Mhm.
actually buy into and actually use the technology. So what we see in the world of CMMS as well as other aspects of technology, right? You got industry 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 and on, right? And how do we on one hand avoid pretending technology that's coming in is a magic button that's just going to fix everything, while at the same time focusing in on the fact that our human inputs, our frontline workforce, our doers need to be bought in. What can you tell us about that and
Yeah.
some strategies for organizations that need to figure out how to do that better?
Yeah, there's no silver bullet for any one organization or any one piece of software. But I'll use example is and this goes back several years at my company is we brought in Slack, the messaging app,
Hmm.
and we felt it was good to communicate with some of our workers that were at other facilities, even just be able to communicate between the shop and the engineers. Yeah, it wasn't that far of a walk, but anytime an engineer gets up and walks out of the shop and comes back in, that's a minimum of 10 or 15 minutes out of their day. If they could answer a question really quickly to the guy on the shop floor without getting up from their desk, they're going to be more productive. So we started using that. And it also took away a lot of those emails where it just kind of circles around the company and reply all, and everybody's been a part of a held hostage in an email chain at some point in their life. We then switched at one point to Teams, similar idea. But then what we found is, hey, we moved into Teams, we could start, sharing files, and we're all working on the same Excel. Instead of sending that Excel document out and having 15 people edit it and then try to pull it all back in, now you're able to host it on the cloud. You can all edit at the same time and all. We got a lot of pushback in the beginning. We got a lot of pushback. It was, wait, okay, great. Now we've got an email. We're texting. Now we've got Slack or Teams, whichever. Now I've got another way to message people, and so we had to kind of put some rules around it. And we said, guys, like, if you need if you need an answer right away, messaging is probably the way to get that because it's very interactive. If you don't need if it's like, hey, get that to me by the end of the week or whatever, maybe an email is better. Um, use these communication tools for collaboration, for discussing things, maybe even arguing about things. Get it all kind of out in the thread, and then when you're done, like, okay, now here's our action items. Sure, put that into an email and send it out to everybody. Here's our actionable items instead of 100 emails back and forth between everybody. The long story short is, there was complaining about that in the beginning, but if I went back, nowadays, and went to the company and said, hey, what would happen if we took away Teams or took away Slack? They would be like, we would be lost. Like how would we even function? Like,
Yeah.
we rely on this. This is a tool that we love. So and that's just an example of a tool in technology like that, right? Whether it's a ticketing system or a maintenance system, whether it's a CRS system for tracking sales, it's only as good as the time and energy that you put into it. And if you don't put that time and energy into it, no, it will not be a great tool. A perfect example, LinkedIn. I have so many younger people go like, LinkedIn's useless. I post a message and I don't get anything back. And you know what? That's true. You don't in the beginning because you just started. I've been on LinkedIn for, I don't know, God, probably 15 years or more, probably 20. I don't even know how old LinkedIn is, but it's been a long time. And you don't see much, and all of a sudden then you see this exponential curve. And now I can reach out and find an expert in almost anything. Or if I have a question, I've got this vast network of people that I can contact. And if I don't know somebody, they know somebody at least. So you've got to put in the work on the tools before they really become effective. And I think too many people give up on tools too early. They're like, this is too complicated. This doesn't work. I don't like this system. And they really don't give it a chance. My mom said, you got to eat the vegetables to get strong, right? You don't like eating the
Yeah.
vegetables, and eventually you get older and like, hey, you know what? These are not that bad. I kind of like them. So
Yeah. Yeah. There's a mentality shift in this whole concept of meeting people where they are. What is your why? What is the why? And that's why when you're looking at technology of any kind or any process change, change management is a thing. It's a thing, yes. And how do you really give yourself a better chance of success? Because you can't necessarily guarantee success in maintenance environments, manufacturing environments, and a lot of these environments that we have in common or might have some overlap or even fringe relatedness. The dumping of technology on people because we've decided we're going to do this. Can it work? Maybe. You're going to have some uphill battles. There's ways to get that going. But if they know about it ahead of time, they being everybody that's going to be involved and touch it, and the inputs are the most critical aspect of it, you want to make sure you assure the higher levels of adoption by getting people involved early and finding out what they like. Because
yeah,
if you've got the people and you've got the process or processes in place, right? You have, let's say, from a maintenance perspective, we're talking about a culture of fundamental excellence when it comes to maintenance best practices within a plant or otherwise. We want to be sure what technology we introduce enhances that, doesn't disrupt that or change that. If there's step elimination because it's being rolled into another step, so you're getting efficient, it still has to make sense. It can't just be here, do this from now on, because all of your people typically at your organization want to do great work, whatever it is, whether
yeah,
they're maintaining something, repairing something, which are definitely two different things, or if they're in the front office helping to orchestrate, facilitate, etc. I'm not talking about control here. And then leadership needs
yeah,
to see, track, and
yeah,
manage this from their own viewpoints. That's where it happens, is with the people. So we have to know that first. Really interesting what you're talking about, how if you go back now and said, hey, what if we took this technology away or this tool that you have away? Everybody's up in arms, and it happens all the time, especially in the CMMS world. One of my best stories going years back was maintenance teams being resistant, and then you do breakout training between the
yeah,
vendor, the client, and their team, and really show them, here's what you need to do, and this is how this is going to work for you and make a difference. And then 2 weeks
Mhm.
later, without following up, they're calling you saying, we have no idea how we were doing what we're doing. We are so happy.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
it was. Is we take
Yeah.
these approaches where, who are you? And we could spin
Yeah.
out here and, like, take a go and see approach, work with your teams, but this is important to hear from you as well, because
And some
you're
of it,
in.
yeah, sorry. Yeah, and some of it is fear of the unknown as well too. I remember when we transitioned. I purchased a machine shop 15 years ago or so and folded it into R&D to vertically integrate. You know, the machinists there were probably some of the best G code programmers I've ever seen. You know, they could look at a print and just sit there and type away on the Haas and just and code right away. But we were making all these parts in 3D and using our CAD software. And like, okay, we should be taking this directly into these machines from 3D. We shouldn't be, recoding, all this G code. And they were very reluctant to try new software because they were really good at what they did, which is great. I mean, I couldn't program in G code, but they could be faster by doing toolpath creation using the 3D. Um, some of the machinists, they were afraid of, running the tools faster, and like, what if I break a tool? Well, then you break a tool. I mean, that's part of the learning process, is figuring out how fast you can run on some of these things. I'm not gonna yell and scream if we break a tool. Now, if you break the same tool 5 times in a row because you do the same thing, yeah, sure, that's different. But if you learn from it and go, oh, okay, I can't run it that fast, or I can't, feed and speed this fast, that's how we all learn. So, and again, now fast forward, the engineers take it, upload them to the drives. The machinists take them, generate the tool paths, Wi-Fi directly to the CNCs. Their lives are so much easier now. And they would never go back to the old way of doing it. And they're running parts faster, and they're getting better finishes and all this sort of stuff. So, sometimes it's just that fear of the unknown and learning
Yeah.
something new. And you gotta be willing, as a leader, you've got to be willing to let people make mistakes as they learn new tools, as opposed to, I gave you this tool, why aren't you doing perfect on day two? Well, because it's a new tool. It takes time to learn how to use it, and maybe the way that the company intended you to use it is not the best way to use it. I mean, we've all run into that. I've seen people using software in a different way than other people are using it. Like, oh, that's interesting. They're using it in a very different way than they are, but it's not better or worse. It's just different.
Yeah.
So it's whatever works for your organization.
That's important. That's important from a leadership and a team perspective, and it helps teams actually buy in, really,
Mhm.
really buy in when they know, I can go and do this, and if I make a mistake, they already know that I'm learning,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that creates
yeah,
opportunity for intrinsic motivation for people to actually say, you know what, I am going to dive in. I'm not only going to try this, I'm going to go in intentionally to make this a part of what I do, because that's what we need to do as an
yeah,
organization. That's the
yeah.
difference, and it's kind of simple and complex all at the same time. I want to switch gears a little bit,
Exactly.
just being mindful of time. And
Mhm.
you just came back from a trade conference, and one of the things you seemed really excited about is you didn't have to set up a booth or anything. You just got to go and enjoy, and it was Automate 2024. So could you give us
Yeah,
just a
yeah.
brief, 2-3 liner on what were some of your
Sure.
favorite things about it?
Yeah, yeah. Automate's a great show. A3 puts on a really, really good trade show. It has really become the go-to show for all things, robotics and high-tech automation. There's some smaller shows out there and there's things like Pack Expo that's very packaging centric, of course. But if we're really talking about true automation and high technology, it's really the best show out there right now. I will say, robots are proliferating. I think I made a comment that there was, no shortage of another, 15 or so more cobot companies, which probably 14 of them will be out of business, unfortunately. It's too many. But it is, I think it's good in a way because it's helping with competition, right? It's helping drive the prices down. Robot prices are getting to that point now where machine builders can really, without even thinking about it, if I got more than 2 or 3 axes of motion, I'm just going to throw a robot on it because it's cheaper to throw this robot on than to design some complex mechanism. Um, you know, Definitely things like remote control, remote access, getting data and getting information out of the systems, very important. It's always been important, but it's becoming easier and easier to do. Our favorite word, artificial intelligence, AI. Everybody and their brother will claim that they've got AI. I'd say probably about 5%, maybe 10, and if I'm being gracious, actually do have AI. But the ones who really do are doing some pretty interesting things. It's going to take a while before it really, really cements into the culture. But if you're not looking at it and figuring out how you can use it in your business, whether it's in the design process or programming process, or even just in your front office work, if you're not at least looking and investigating it, you're probably behind the curve a little bit. Doesn't mean you're
Question.
going to implement it tomorrow, but you should be looking at it.
Question about that, and this kind of applies to everything, but when we talk about culture and maturity and where you're at on your journey and where you're at with those levels of maturity, do you think at this time right now that it's okay for companies that are less mature to not only look at, like you were suggesting, but also maybe even incorporate some basic AI tools if they can tie it to a direct function and it's not like the empty promise of the magic silver bullet, but it's actually going to be effective to improve efficiency and maybe get people towards accomplishing more with less?
Absolutely. I mean, take advantage of some of these tools. I played around with creating my own Chat GPT that would take, based on some basic information, take a proposal template and kind of plug this information into it and write up a proposal. Right. So, that sort of stuff. And was it perfect? No, it was more of a science experiment for me, just to see what could be done. Somebody who knows LLMs a lot better than I would probably be able to flesh it out and make it actually a product. But I think you definitely, it doesn't matter what size company, it's things you should be looking at. Look at that low hanging fruit. It's already coming into our lives we've all seen the autocomplete with emails, and not just a word, but like an entire phrase. There's times now where I'm sitting there typing and it's got 6 words. I'm like, yes, this is exactly what I was going to say. Tab, boom, there we go. I'm much faster now. That sort of stuff, AI tools within Excel and within other Office documents. Instead of writing macros anymore, that's kind of what the AI has started to do. It's kind of automatically writing those macros for you a little bit. So anytime you become more efficient, it's gonna save you time. It's gonna save you money. So yeah, I think companies, no matter what size, should be investigating this. Just don't go down the rabbit hole of AI is going to solve all of our problems, because it's not. It's still got a ways to go, and it still has its problems of giving wrong answers and doing the wrong things and not what we expect and all. But I definitely think we need to open our eyes to what it can do. And I've got a little list, a note list of like, hey, look into like, can we do this one day? Like, and it might be 4 or 5 years from now, but it's something I'm still thinking about. Could we take this large amount of data that we've got? And I think that's the important thing. Anytime you have large amounts of data, which kind of goes back to your, what we were talking about before, your maintenance, right? If you've got large amounts of maintenance data, how often motors go bad and how they heat up, or vibration analysis, things like that. If you've got all this data, you can start packing it into an AI model and start doing maybe some predictive analysis of, hey, you know what, that motor's probably going to fail in the next 3 or 4 months. So there's lots of possibilities there, I think.
It's true. And one thing I would add to that, for anybody that's going to do that, especially in those areas you cited as examples, make sure it's the right people that are leveraging that technology, and don't just do a bunch of guesswork, because you still want to tie it to
Yeah.
the principles that are getting you the success that you have now as you bring in this technology. So it's not going to do the work for you yet. You're going to do the work
Hmm.
first
Hmm.
and teach it how to work and all these great things. Do you think sensors and all this kind of stuff like that is oversold? Do you think people get kind of sold a bill of goods out there in the world when it comes to some of that other technology?
Yeah, some of it. Although I think it's going to start working its way down into the, I'm going to say, cheaper components. I mean, really one of the first. I think one of the first, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but to me, one of the first kind of real AI advances in automation was in vision systems. There were some companies that were out there to the point where they could, pick up a part and say, here's a good part, here's a good part, here's a good part, then here's a bad part, here's a bad, and they didn't say why it was bad or why it was good. They just said this is good and this is bad. And the systems then started learning, okay, here's the differences, and this is what makes it good and bad. And with a very few number of training models, it got pretty good at picking out good and bad parts. That's super powerful, right? If you don't have to sit there and in most vision systems, it's like, okay, draw a box and measure this and do that and look for the number of pixels here to see if it's miscolored or something. No, if I could just say good, 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 bad, 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 and let it learn, that makes my job easier.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that'll probably start to drive its way down into things as simple as maybe photoelectric, sensors or photoreflective sensors or things like that, where it could, as we all know, conditions can affect it and misalignment can affect it. If it could start working in some of those smarts to like, hey, if I'm misaligned, I've learned that I have to reduce my gain by X, and it'll automatically start to do that to become a little bit more forgiving. When is that going to happen? I don't know. I mean, can you get AI down into something as cheap as a photo eye? I don't know if it's worth it or not, but those are possibilities. I think that we could have, we're moving forward in this industry.
Yeah, and that's some of the I would say that's some of the fun, really exciting parts about what's happening right now. Some of the fun aspects of it. So, a couple more things. I want to first ask, what are you, as far as trends go across all of industry, just straight off the top, what are you most concerned or worried about right now?
Most concerned or worried about? Um, I guess I would say that right now, I think everybody has seen the slowdown post COVID, right? So COVID, manufacturing really took off. It was the silver lining for automation and manufacturing companies is, everything ramped up because companies realized I can't rely on this workforce that all of a sudden is everybody's sick and can't come into work. We can't rely on foreign suppliers. We need to have things made in the United States and all. And it was a really great moment when everybody kind of came together and said, "Yep, we got to make stuff in America, and we're going to make all these machines." And all of us machine builders got to be 2+ year backlog. I think now that COVID's over with and things have kind of tapered down, unfortunately, I see manufacturers, their short-term memory is very very short, and they're like, well, we're just going to throw people at the problem again, right? Um, and maybe onshoring is not as important as we thought it was in the beginning. Now, I think it's still higher than it was pre-COVID, but it's certainly not at the levels that it was at the peak, where pretty much everybody's like, nope, we're investing. Um, so I've seen a lot of companies, a lot of manufacturers. Now, I don't want to say changing their mind, but they're delaying. They're afraid to make a decision. And if you ask them why, you'll get all kinds of reasons and excuses. But fundamentally, I think it's just a little bit of fear. It's a little bit. Sometimes it's they want their numbers to look good for investors, and with inflation and all that, they've got to combat that. Um, So that's kind of one of the things that concerns me is that our manufacturing base in the U.S. is kind of forgotten how good we did during COVID and getting manufacturing going back in the U.S. And now we're kind of slacking back off again. So that's a little concerning for me.
Interesting one that you brought up there. I think a lot of people that hear this are going to want to think about that pretty deeply. It's important. It's critically important because
Mhm.
I was expecting something like the skilled trades gap or something like that, but I really like that you said that. I think that's a really
Yeah.
good one. I want to switch you to what I call the fun question segment for your first time on CMMS radio. I get to ask you three
Okay.
fun questions, totally random.
Okay. All right.
And the very first one is, what is your favorite music?
Oh wow! I think anybody who knows me knows that I am very eclectic in my music. If you put on my Spotify a random, you will hear pretty much everything. But if I had to put an answer to it, I'm a a Gen Xer of the the '90s, so it's probably that alternative slash punk slash ska kind of '90s music.
Cool. I like that one. Now, next fun question. What is your favorite sport or hobby? And on sport, it doesn't have to be one that you play, it could be one that you
Okay.
like to observe or support.
Sure. I'll give you two answers on that one. I was a cyclist slash triathlete for, well, I mean, my dad got me into cycling when I was probably 10 or 11 years old, and I really only kind of retired from it a couple years ago. So for 35-ish years or so, I was a semi-competitive cyclist slash triathlete. So I always enjoyed that. Enjoyed watching things like the Tour de France and things like that. But also being raised in the South, it's football, and especially college football. Go Gators!
Yeah.
Even though we've kind of stanked the last few years.
that's well, I gotta normally I don't do a follow-up on question two for the fun question segment, but uh, when you bring up the Gators, the first thing that popped into my head was like Miami Vice. You remember the drama series and
Yeah,
yeah, because I think one of the characters was a Gator in his the
yeah,
character backstory. He was a
yeah. He
quarterback.
played football. Yeah, he
Yeah,
plays football. Yeah, yeah,
cool stuff.
exactly.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
never know what's going to come up, especially when you start getting it a little gray. Uh, here's the big one though. Fun question number three. What is your philosophy, perspective, opinion, or approach? No wrong answers here on work life balance.
Wow, that's a deep one. I my philosophy and approach is, and it sounds a little trite, but it's the work hard, play hard. I've always been one of those people who I'll just put in the extra time and the extra hours, get the work done, and if you can get it done quickly, then that allows you time to go do the things that you really want to do in life.
Yeah.
I always ran my company that way. I always said that, you know, your family, when I talk to my employees, your family comes first. The company should come as a close second. Um, but if you need to take care of your family, if you get a sick child, if you've got some strife in your life for financial issues or legal issues or whatever it happens to be, if you're coming into work with those things, you're probably not very effective, right? If your kid's at home sick, or you had to find a babysitter for him or something like that, you're not thinking about work. You're thinking about your sick kid, right?
Yep.
So stay home with the kid. Maybe you'll get 60% of your work done remotely. You're not going to be 100% that day. Maybe you won't get any done. But at the end of the day, or at the end of the week, or the end of the month, whatever, to me, it's about results and expectations. We agreed that you're going to get X done by this period of time. And as long as you do it, I really don't care how you do that. At the same time, I also don't want work. I don't want you working 60 hours a week to get your work done either. That means you've got too much work. So I do believe that you have to have work-life balance. You'll hear some people just say, and usually it's usually startup founders or people out in Silicon Valley. There is no work-life balance. You've got to be working on your company, 100 hours a week and all. That is a perfect way to burn yourself out. Humans just cannot. Well, I should say most humans cannot do that sort of work all the time.
Yeah.
You know, we're on this earth for a limited amount of time. Let's go enjoy it. Let's go see things. Let's go travel. Let's have experiences. You know, let's fall in love. Let's have friends. Those are all those things that you know, we're intended to do. Quite honestly, we humans made up this work thing. Let's be honest, right? You know, we could go back to trading, you know, cows for wheat if we really wanted to, but in the bottom line is you're right, you gotta enjoy life. So
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. And I say there's no wrong answers because everybody's got their different approaches and there's something of
sure,
value there to somebody. And
absolutely,
that's all we're trying to do. So I want to let everybody know if you want to get in touch with, learn about, and have your own conversation with Sean, you can find him on LinkedIn. That's the best way to find him. He's active there. He's putting a lot of content out there to get us thinking. And I think, you know, that's really important because I think critical thinking is something that should be on the endangered species list. I don't think common sense is common at all. And I like his posts because it gets me thinking. So I'm hoping some of you will. It's Sean, Sean Dotson, Dotson. You can find him on LinkedIn. Connect, get your own conversation going. Sean, this was awesome. I really appreciate you joining me on CMMS Radio.
yeah. Hey, I had a great time, Greg. This was really fun. I like these casual conversations. This is great.
Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS from selection to implementation to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.